the first thing you hear isn't the sound. It's the silence that comes before it, the gentle, productive hum of a half-dozen servers, the whisper of the fans in my custom cooling rack, the low thrum of the uninterruptible power supply, the entire symphony of my digital life, my career, my sanity, vanished. In its place was a void, a dead, echoing quiet that lasted for exactly half a second. Then came the alarms. Not the loud, obnoxious kind you see in movies. I'm not an amateur. My alarms are carefully calibrated, directional, and designed to convey maximum information with minimum noise. A piercing, high-frequency tone from the left speaker meant a critical failure at the physical layer. A deep, warbling klaxon from the right meant a catastrophic loss of all external network handshakes. I got both at the same time. My head snapped up from the line of code I was debugging. Across my triple monitor setup, a sea of reassuring green and placid blue text had been replaced by a violent, screaming red. Connection lost, critical failure. All client gateways unresponsive, packet loss, 100%. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a DDoS attack. This wasn't a software bug. This was a physical impossibility. This was someone pulling the plug on the entire system. My personal Wi-Fi, run off the same main line, was also gone. My phone, disconnected from Wi-Fi, immediately buzzed with a high-priority notification from my primary client. A cold dread, sharp and metallic, bloomed in my chest. I stood up, my chair scraping against the concrete floor of my converted garage/mission control. I walked to the single window that faced the street, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. And that's when I saw her. Brenda. She was standing on the edge of my immaculate HOA-mandated lawn, right next to the utility pedestal. In one hand, she held a pair of heavy-duty garden shears, the kind designed for severing thick branches. In the other, she held the two ends of my commercial-grade armored fiber optic cable, now dangling uselessly like a bisected earthworm. She wasn't fleeing the scene. She wasn't trying to hide. She was just standing there, a triumphant, righteous smirk on her face, admiring her handiwork in the bright Saturday morning sun. It all started, as most suburban wars do, not with a bang, but with a passive-aggressive notice about trash cans. Flashback 3 weeks earlier. To understand the sheer, unadulterated fury that motivated Brenda, you have to understand Maple Creek Estates. It's less a neighborhood and more a social experiment in enforced conformity. Every house is one of 3 shades of beige. Every lawn is mowed to a regulation 2.5 inches. Every mailbox is the exact same model, purchased from the same supplier, standing at the exact same angle. I bought a house here for one reason: the promise of a gigabit fiber connection and blissful, uninterrupted quiet. I'm Alex. I run a boutique cybersecurity firm called Quiet Sentry out of my home. Most people hear cybersecurity and picture guys in hoodies from movie posters hacking into the Pentagon to stop a missile launch. The reality is far less glamorous and infinitely more important. I protect the boring stuff: the digital backbones of municipal water treatment facilities, the remote monitoring systems for regional power grids, the off-site data backups for a dozen community banks. I'm the guy who makes sure the lights stay on and the water doesn't start tasting like pennies because a hacker in a Minsk basement got bored. It's not sexy, but it's critical. And it pays well enough for me to afford my crippling addiction to high-end coffee and the illusion of peace. On a perfectly average Tuesday morning, I was enjoying that illusion. I was sipping a single-origin Ethiopian Harar, watching a live feed of network traffic from a water reclamation plant in Des Moines, and casually deflecting a minor brute force attempt on their firewall. It was serene. The only sound was the gentle hum of my servers and the distant, synchronized hiss of the neighborhood sprinkler systems. The doorbell rang. Not a normal ring. It was a sharp, insistent double press, the kind used by people who believe their time is more valuable than yours. I opened the door to find a woman in her mid-50s, clad in a pastel pink tracksuit, a matching visor, and tennis shoes so white they hurt to look at. She held a clipboard like a royal scepter. This was my first encounter with Brenda, president, founder, and supreme overlord of the Maple Creek Estates HOA. "Alex?" she asked, though it wasn't a question. Her eyes weren't looking at me, but past me, scanning my entryway for violations. "That's me," I said, forcing a neighborly smile. "Brenda, from the Homeowners Association," she said, tapping her clipboard. "I'm here about a violation." "A violation?" "Section 4, subsection C of the Community Charter," she began, her voice taking on the practiced, condescending tone of a bureaucrat who's found a purpose in life. "Waste receptacles. They must be removed from public view by 7 p.m. on collection day. Your receptacles," she paused for dramatic effect, "were still visible from the street at 8:05 p.m. last night. I have photographic evidence." I blinked. "You're kidding." Her smile didn't waver, but it didn't reach her eyes. "The HOA does not kid about charter violations, Alex. This is about maintaining our community standards, curb appeal, property values." "Brenda," I said, trying to keep the incredulity out of my voice. "I was on a conference call with the people who manage the power grid for 3 states. We were dealing with a minor brownout situation. I'm sorry if preventing a potential blackout made me an hour late on trash can duty." "We all have our responsibilities," she replied, completely unfazed. "Mine is to this community." Her eyes narrowed slightly as she leaned forward, sniffing the air. "What is that humming sound?" "That's my air conditioner." A lie. It was the custom cooling unit for my server rack. "It seems rather loud for a residential unit," she noted, making a mark on her clipboard. "And that welcome mat." She pointed a perfectly manicured finger at the simple black mat on my doorstep. It said, "Welcome." The font is not on the pre-approved list. The charter specifies either Times New Roman or Helvetica. That appears to be Calibri. I stared at her, genuinely speechless. I had moved to a place where fonts were policed. I, a man who regularly fought off digital incursions from Eastern European crime syndicates, was being cited for an unapproved welcome mat. I'll look into it," I managed to stammer. "Please do," she said, her smile finally reaching something resembling satisfaction. She handed me a crisp, printed violation notice. "This is just a warning. The second offense carries a $50 fine. Have a wonderful day." She turned and marched away, her white sneakers squeaking with righteous purpose. I stood in my doorway, holding the notice, feeling a sense of dread that no firewall log had ever given me. This wasn't just a nosy neighbor. This was a tyrant who had found her tiny kingdom, and I was the resident heretic. That evening, I received an email from her with the subject line, "Helpful Information." It contained a link to the HOA's 150-page rulebook and a PDF of the 5 approved welcome mat designs. The war had begun. The conflict escalated a week later. My business was growing, and my standard consumer-grade internet, even the gigabit plan, wasn't cutting it anymore. I needed more bandwidth, more stability, a dedicated, unshared line. I paid a small fortune to a commercial provider to run a dedicated fiber optic line from the main trunk on the street directly to my garage. It was a serious upgrade, the kind of connection most people only dream of. It also required digging a narrow 6-inch wide trench across my front lawn. I did everything by the book. I got the city permits. I called the utility marking service. I hired a professional licensed crew, Dave and Gary's Underground Cabling. Dave and Gary were the platonic ideal of contractors. They were built like refrigerators, had beards that could house small birds, and possessed a zen-like calm that came from decades of dealing with inexplicable homeowner nonsense. They had just broken ground, slicing a neat line in the perfect turf with a spade, when the pink tracksuit reappeared. "Stop!" Brenda's voice cut through the morning air. "Cease all unauthorized excavation immediately!" Dave, a man who looked like he could arm wrestle a bear and win, paused with the shovel halfway into the earth. "Ma'am?" "I am the president of the HOA," Brenda announced, marching onto my lawn. "I demand to see your permits for this desecration." I sighed and walked out, holding the folder with the city permits, the work order, everything. "Brenda, it's all here. We're fully permitted. It's a simple trench for a utility line." She snatched the folder and scanned the documents, clearly disappointed to find them in order. But a true bureaucrat is never without a weapon. "The city permit is irrelevant," she declared. "This is a matter of aesthetic disruption, covered under Section 9, subsection A of the Architectural Guidelines. Any alteration to landscaping requires a formal proposal and approval from the Architectural Review Committee." "The Architectural Review Committee?" I asked. "Yes," she said proudly. "Me, Carol from number 42, and Bob from number 56. And I can tell you right now, we would never approve of this." Dave and Gary exchanged a look of pure, unadulterated disbelief. "Ma'am," Dave said, his voice a low rumble of strained patience, "we do this every day. The trench will be 6 inches wide. We lay the conduit, we backfill it, we put the sod right back on top. By lunchtime, you won't even know we were here. It'll look better than before." Brenda was already taking pictures with her phone. "This is completely unacceptable. And what kind of sod are you using for the patch? The approved varietal for Maple Creek Estates is a Kentucky Bluegrass blend, sod quality A. That looks like you're planning to just throw some seed down. A fescue blend, I'd wager. Unacceptable." Gary, the quieter of the two, leaned over to me while Brenda was measuring the width of the shovel blade with a small tape measure she'd produced from a pocket. "Dude," he whispered, his voice full of awe. "Is she for real? I laid cable at the CIA headquarters in Langley last year. I had less oversight. We had guys with guns watching us, but they were more chill than her." The verdict was delivered 10 minutes later. All work was to be halted pending an emergency review by her committee. Dave and Gary, bless their hearts, apologized to me. They couldn't work under these conditions. They'd have to reschedule and charge me for the lost time. As they packed up their truck, Brenda stood on her own lawn, arms crossed, beaming. She hadn't just won a battle. She believed she had defended the very soul of her community from the chaos of a slightly messy lawn. I stood there, looking at the half-dug, 10-foot-long scar on my property. It was a declaration of war. My multi-$1,000 internet upgrade was on hold indefinitely. My patience, however, had just run out. I didn't know it then, but Brenda had just sealed her own fate. She had mistaken my desire for quiet for weakness. And in her quest to police my lawn, she was about to make an enemy of a man who understood, better than anyone, that the most devastating weapons in the modern world aren't guns or bombs, but information and infrastructure. And she was about to attack mine directly. Present day. And so I found myself staring through my window at the architect of my digital destruction. Brenda, my nemesis, the breaker of internets. The woman who had just committed a felony that likely carried a 5-figure price tag in damages, all because she had a theological objection to my welcome mat. For a moment, I was paralyzed by the sheer audacity of it. It was like watching a toddler solve a disagreement by setting the house on fire. The alarms in my office were still shrieking, a symphony of failure. My phone was vibrating off the desk. Tri-State Water Authority. Urgent, the caller ID screamed. I snapped out of it. Panic is a luxury. Adrenaline is a tool. I grabbed the phone. Alex, what the hell is happening? It was Frank, the head of IT for the Water Authority, and he sounded like he was about to have a heart attack. We're blind. All our remote monitoring is down. Every reservoir, every pumping station, every filtration plant, all dark. The system is running on automated protocols, but if a primary pump fails or a chemical balance goes critical, we won't know until the water in 3 cities turns brown. What is happening? My mind raced. A standard fiber repair would take a service crew hours to get here, and hours more to splice. That was best-case scenario. Given it was a Saturday, it could be days. I didn't have days. I had minutes. Give me 5 minutes, Frank, I said, my voice much calmer than I felt. I'm switching to a backup system. A backup system? We don't have a backup system with you that's on a different physical line. I know, I said. It's a new one. A robust infrastructure solution. Just give me 5. I'll call you back. I hung up before he could argue. There was no time. I sprinted from the garage, through the kitchen, and yanked open the door to the basement. Every suburban house has its secrets. Forgotten toys, questionable design choices from the 70s. My secret was a bit more strategic. Before I bought this place, I did my homework. Not on the schools or the property values, but on the ground beneath it. And I'd found a ghost. I scrambled to a dusty, unfinished corner of the basement, behind the hulking, ancient water heater. Tucked away was a section of drywall that didn't quite match the rest. I'd installed it myself. I kicked it hard. The panel popped out, revealing a dark, cobweb-filled cavity. And there it was, my ace in the hole. It was a heavy-duty olive-drab junction box about the size of a shoebox. A faded stencil on its surface read, Property of US Dept of Defense, COG Trunk Line 7B, COG Continuity of Government. During the height of the Cold War, the government had built a network of secret, hardened, redundant data lines all over the country. They were designed to keep the government running in the event of, say, Moscow turning into a sheet of radioactive glass. Most of them were decommissioned after the 80s. The circuits turned off. The network dismantled. But the physical fiber, the actual glass in the ground, was often too expensive to dig up. So it was just left there, a digital ghost town sleeping under America's suburbs. Through a combination of public record deep dives and some skills I picked up on a freelance government contract I'm not supposed to talk about, I had discovered that Trunk Line 7B ran directly under my house. I'd found the access point, mapped it, and marveled at it as a piece of network archaeology. It was a curiosity, a conversation starter for a very, very small number of people. I never, ever, in a million years, thought I would actually use it. Until today. My hands, slick with a cold sweat, went to work. I had a specialized toolkit ready for just this kind of insane, MacGyver-level emergency. It was 2 minutes of frantic, hyper-focused activity. I ripped the severed, useless fiber input from my main server gateway. With a wire stripper, I exposed the delicate glass core of my internal network's main line. Then, I unbolted the heavy front plate of the COG box. Inside, it was pristine, a time capsule of 1980s military-grade hardware. The connection ports were archaic, but fiber is fiber. Using a portable fusion splicer, a device that precisely melts 2 strands of fiber optic cable together into a seamless whole, I began the unholy matrimony. It's a delicate process, basically gluing glass together with a tiny arc of lightning. My hands were shaking, but my mind was crystal clear. I was Frankenstein, and this was my monster. I jammed the newly spliced connector into a port labeled Node 7B1A. I bypassed the modern handshake protocols on my end, forcing my system to speak a long, dead dialect of network language. For a second, nothing happened. Then, a single green light on the junction box flickered to life. On my server gateway, another light blinked, then another. They cascaded, turning from red to amber to a solid, beautiful, glorious green. I scrambled back upstairs, my heart threatening to beat its way out of my chest. I sat down at my desk and pulled up a command prompt. I typed tracert 8.8.8.8. The traceroute came back, and my jaw dropped. It wasn't bouncing to the local ISP hub. It was bizarre. 10.1 msnode.7 b-1a.cog.pntg.mil 2.1 ms.rtr.pntg-dmz.us.gov 3. 1 ms.rtr.iad.level3.net 4. I was online. Not just online. I was rocketing through the skeletal remains of a secret military network. My ping time was less than 1/10 of a millisecond. My bandwidth test showed speeds I didn't think were commercially possible. It was like I had been driving a beat-up sedan and had just hot-wired an F-22. I took a deep breath, grabbed my phone, and called Frank back. It had been 4 minutes. "Refresh your screen," I said. There was a pause. I heard frantic clicking, then a stunned silence. "Holy Mother of God," Frank whispered. "We're back. All systems green. The connection it's faster than before. It's faster than it's ever been. What did you do, Alex? Did you launch a damn satellite?" I leaned back in my chair, the adrenaline starting to subside, replaced by a giddy, terrifying sense of power. I looked out the window. Brenda was still out there, now talking animatedly to a neighbor, probably recounting her heroic tale of civic duty. "Something like that, Frank," I said, a slow smile spreading across my face. "Let's just call it a robust infrastructure solution." Just as the last of the adrenaline drained away, leaving me feeling shaky and strangely euphoric, a new set of lights appeared. Not the comforting green glow of my monitors, but the strobing, aggressive blue and red of police cars. 2 of them. They pulled up right in front of my house, bathing the beige siding in pulses of official, serious light. Of course, Brenda had called the cops. I watched through the window as she marched up to the first car, her clipboard somehow still in hand. She gestured wildly at my house, then at the severed cable, which she held up like a slain serpent. She was putting on a performance, casting herself as the damsel in distress, the lone citizen brave enough to stand up to the mysterious villain in house number 1138. 2 officers got out. One was older, with the weary, patient face of a man who had seen every flavor of human stupidity and was long past being surprised. This was Officer Miller. The other was younger, sharper, with a let's-do-this-by-the-book energy. Officer Ramirez. I decided to meet them on my own terms. I took a deep breath, smoothed down my t-shirt, and walked outside, closing the door gently behind me. And I'm telling you, officer, he's running some kind of illegal, unlicensed data mining operation, Brenda was saying, her voice pitched to carry across the lawn. He has unauthorized industrial cables running to his house. When I confronted him about his numerous violations, I had to take decisive action to protect this community. Officer Miller turned his tired eyes from her to me. "Sir, are you Alex?" "I am," I said calmly. "Sir, the lady here says you're running a data mine?" he asked, the corner of his mouth twitching slightly. "Officer," I began, my voice even and polite, "I run a fully licensed and registered cybersecurity company from my home office. That lady," I pointed at Brenda, "the one holding what is now evidence in a felony destruction of property case, just caused approximately $50,000 in damages, and for about 4.5 minutes took the municipal water supply for the entire Tri-City area offline. Ramirez, the younger cop, who had been dutifully taking notes, stopped writing. His head snapped up. Wait, the water supply? Brenda scoffed. He's lying! He's trying to intimidate me. Look at this cable. It's not normal. She's right about that part, I conceded, turning to the officers. It's a commercial fiber optic line. It costs more per foot than your patrol car. And she cut it, with garden shears. Miller sighed the deep, soulful sigh of a man contemplating retirement. Ma'am, can you please put the cable down? He then looked at me. Sir, can I see this home office? Absolutely, I said. Follow me. I led them through the house and into the garage. Their reaction was predictable. First, confusion. Then, a sort of reluctant awe. The hum of the servers had returned, the racks of blinking lights casting a cool blue glow over everything. It looked like something out of a movie, and they were standing in the middle of it. Whoa, Ramirez breathed. As I said, cybersecurity, I explained. I pointed to a screen showing a geographic map with dozens of green dots. These dots are my clients, power substations, banks, hospitals. I monitor their networks to make sure nobody bad gets in. To do that, I need a very fast, very reliable internet connection, the one your star witness just performed a high-speed appendectomy on. I showed them my business license, framed on the wall. I showed them my corporate registration with the state. I pulled up the frantic emails from Frank at the Water Authority on my phone and let them read them. Miller and Ramirez were completely out of their depth, and they knew it. This wasn't a domestic dispute or a noise complaint. This was something else entirely. Miller pinched the bridge of his nose. Okay, so let me get this straight. You work from home on the computer. Correct, officer. And she, he jerked a thumb towards the outdoors, cut your internet cable because she didn't like the look of it. And because my welcome mat has the wrong font. But yes, that's the gist. Ramirez looked at his partner. This is a civil matter, right, John? Destruction of property? A big one, Miller said. He turned back to me. We can't arrest her for this, not right now. You'll have to take her to civil court to get your money back. Oh, I know, I said with a smile. But I'd very much appreciate it if you could get her on record in your official police report, admitting to cutting the cable. Miller's tired eyes glinted with understanding. He saw the path I was paving. I think we can do that. They went back outside. I followed and stood on my porch, watching. Ma'am, Miller said to Brenda. His voice now devoid of any warmth. Did you or did you not cut this cable? I did, she said proudly. It was a violation of HOA bylaw 7.2 regarding unapproved external fixtures. Miller looked at Ramirez and gave a subtle nod. Make sure you get that down, he said, just loud enough for me to hear. Quote her directly. Ramirez dutifully wrote in his notepad. Brenda, convinced she was being vindicated, continued to list my various crimes. The humming, the trash cans, the font. The officers let her talk, their pens flying. Finally, they handed us both a card with a case number on it, advised us to seek legal counsel, and got back in their cars, clearly wanting to be anywhere else in the world. As they pulled away, Brenda shot me a look of pure hatred. She thought she had won. She thought she had sicked the cops on me and exposed my nefarious operation. She had no idea that she had just handed me the loaded gun, the signed confession, that I would use to dismantle her entire world. I went back inside, the police report number feeling as valuable as a bar of gold in my pocket. The first phase of my revenge was complete. Now for the second. I sat down in my office, the silent, terrifying power of the ghost line humming beneath my feet. I opened a secure browser and started to dig. I wasn't a hacker in the traditional sense, but I was a master of finding information that didn't want to be found. And for the first time, I wasn't doing it to protect a client. I was doing it for me. I was going to conduct a full deep dive audit on the Maple Creek Estates HOA and on Brenda. The ghost in the machine was awake, and it was hungry. The next 72 hours were a blur of caffeine, code, and calls. The ghost line was more than just fast. It was a skeleton key to a forgotten internet. It gave me access to public record databases, archived municipal servers, and county clerk websites with a speed and clarity that was almost supernatural. I wasn't breaking any laws. I was just a tourist with a supersonic jet in a world of people on foot. My first call was to my lawyer, a sharp, terrifyingly efficient woman named Jessica. "Let me get this straight," she'd said after I explained the situation, a long pause on the other end of the line. I heard her take a sip of something. "Your HOA president, a woman named Brenda, cut your commercial fiber line, which you need for your business, because she thought your welcome mat was tacky." "The font was non-compliant, Jessica. Get it right." A snort of laughter. "And in response, you rerouted your entire home network through a decommissioned, off-the-books Cold War-era military backbone?" "I'm a problem solver," I said. There was another long pause. "Alex," she finally said, her voice filled with a terrifying glee. "This is the best case I've ever heard. Don't do anything else. Just document everything. I want pictures, timelines, and especially that police report number. Oh, this is going to be beautiful." My second set of calls was to my clients. I explained the situation in broad strokes: a localized infrastructure failure caused by third-party interference. Then I made my request. I didn't want them to sue. I just wanted them to write a letter. A formal, official letter on their most intimidating letterhead addressed to the Maple Creek Estates HOA Board of Directors. I wanted them to detail the services I provide, the critical nature of those services, and the operational risks and potential for public endangerment caused by the outage on Saturday morning. Frank at the Tri-State Water Authority was more than happy to oblige. "You want me to write a letter explaining how this woman's gardening hobby nearly caused a public health crisis? Alex, I will have our legal department draft something so terrifying it will make her hair fall out." The head of the Midwest Power Cooperative was similarly enthusiastic. Their letter included phrases like unacceptable grid vulnerability, potential for cascading failures, and terporint, forwarding this incident to our partners at the State Utilities Commission for regulatory review. It was a masterpiece of corporate threat language. My third call was to Dave and Gary. They were still fuming. "She did what?" Dave had bellowed into the phone. "She cut the whole line after we left?" He conferred with Gary. "Okay, buddy. You need a statement from us about her interfering with our work?" "You got it. You need an invoice for our lost time, our travel, our rescheduling fee? It's yours. Anything. We hate HOA queens. We will go to war for you." Finally, I went back to my own research. The main event. Using my newfound digital superpowers, I compiled a complete dossier on the HOA. I downloaded every meeting minute, every budget report, every complaint ever filed. I found that Brenda had used HOA funds to pay for a landscaping project at her own house, classifying it as a community beautification initiative. I found 3 instances of her waiving fines for her friends on the board while enforcing them vigorously for everyone else. It was a petty, suburban dictatorship, and I had the receipts. But the masterstroke, the pièce de résistance, came from the ghost line itself. I dug into the original federal land grants and public domain easement records from the 1960s, when Trunk Line 7B was laid. And I found it. A permanent, non-revocable federal communications right-of-way easement that ran directly through the land that was now Maple Creek Estates. It had never been rescinded. Technically, the entire development, every beige house and perfectly manicured lawn, was in violation of a 60-year-old federal easement. I had no intention of ever using this information. It was my nuclear option. The knowledge alone was enough. Just as I was compiling all my evidence into a neat, hyperlinked folder, an email landed in my inbox. It was from the HOA. Subject: Formal Notice of Emergency Board Meeting. You are hereby summoned to attend an emergency meeting of the Maple Creek Estates HOA Board of Directors. The topic of this meeting will be a formal review of numerous and flagrant charter violations by the homeowner at 1138 Maple Lane, and a vote on potential punitive actions, up to and including forced compliance and expulsion from the community. It was signed by Brenda. She was calling a public trial, my trial. I leaned back in my chair and smiled. It was exactly what I wanted. She wasn't just walking into my trap. She had built the trap herself, baited it, and was now inviting an audience to watch her step in it. The community center meeting room was a temple of beige mediocrity. The walls were beige, the linoleum floor was a slightly different beige, and the stale air tasted of old coffee and faint desperation. 20 or so residents were scattered on uncomfortable folding chairs, their faces a mixture of curiosity and schadenfreude. They were here for the show. At the front of the room, behind a long folding table, sat the tribunal. Brenda in the center, looking regal and severe in a navy blue blazer. To her left and right were her cronies, Carol and Bob, who looked like they'd won a contest to be the most generic-looking suburbanites in existence. I took a seat in the back row, a thick manila folder resting on my lap. I was calm. I was ready. Brenda banged a small gavel. This emergency meeting of the Maple Creek Estates Homeowners Association is now in session. We are here tonight to address a grave matter that threatens the very fabric of our community. She launched into a full-blown PowerPoint presentation. She'd really outdone herself. The first slide was a picture of my house with a big red circle around my trash cans, time-stamped at 8:05 p.m. The next slide was a close-up of my welcome mat with a text box pointing out the offending Calibri font. There were slides on the humming from my garage, the unauthorized excavation, and finally, a dramatic, blurry photo of me talking to the police. "This man, Alex," she said, her voice trembling with manufactured outrage, "has shown a consistent and flagrant disregard for our community's rules. He is running a high-traffic, industrial-scale business from his home, causing noise and disruption. He has attempted to perform illegal modifications to his property. He represents everything we have worked so hard to protect ourselves from." She clicked to her final slide. "Therefore, I move that the board vote to levy the maximum possible fine for each of his 17 documented violations, and to issue a formal cease and desist order against his home business effective immediately." A murmur went through the crowd. This was high drama. Brenda looked out at the audience, triumphant. She looked at me, a smug smile on her face. "Alex, do you have anything to say in your defense?" I stood up slowly, picking up my folder. I didn't go to the podium, I just stood in my place. "I do, Brenda, thank you," I said, my voice calm and clear in the quiet room. "I won't need a PowerPoint. I find that facts are usually more effective. I just have a few documents I'd like to submit to the board for their review." I walked to the front and placed the folder on the table in front of Carol, the board's secretary. She opened it hesitantly. "First," I began, turning to address the room, "you'll find a copy of a police report, case number 72556. In it, the reporting officer documents Miss Brenda's full confession to willfully destroying a piece of commercial telecommunications infrastructure, an act, my lawyer informs me, that constitutes a Class D felony in this state." Carol's eyes went wide as she read the report. Bob leaned over to look. Brenda's smug smile faltered. "Second," I continued, my voice hardening slightly, "you'll find an invoice. It's from the fiber optics company. It's for the emergency repair and replacement of the line that Miss Brenda destroyed. They also recommend, due to the unstable and hostile local environment, that the new line be buried in a protective concrete conduit. The total for that invoice is $72,450. A collective gasp went through the room. Someone in the front row choked on a cookie. Since Miss Brenda has repeatedly stated she was acting in her official capacity as an agent of the HOA, I've had my lawyer forward the invoice to the HOA's legal entity. I'm sure your treasurer will want to handle that promptly to avoid late fees. Brenda was now ashen. The navy blue blazer suddenly looked 2 sizes too big for her. Third, you will find 2 letters. One is from the Tri-State Water Authority. The other is from the Midwest Power Cooperative. They are my clients. Their letters detail how Miss Brenda's actions on Saturday directly endangered the public water supply and the stability of the power grid for over 1 million people. You'll note they both use words like gross negligence and mention that they are forwarding the details of this incident to the relevant state and federal regulatory commissions for review. I'm not a lawyer, but I believe that's what's known as attracting unwanted attention. Carol was visibly trembling as she held the letters with their very official, very scary letterheads. And finally, I said, delivering the killing blow, you'll find a signed and notarized statement from the contractors, Dave and Gary, along with their invoice for $3,000 for the work stoppage caused by Miss Brenda's interference last week. They are, I quote, eager to testify in any legal proceedings. I let the silence hang in the air for a long moment. I looked directly at Brenda, whose face had crumpled into a mask of pure horror. So, to recap, I said, my voice dropping to an almost conversational tone. Your president's actions, taken on your behalf, have resulted in over $75,000 in direct financial liabilities, have endangered public safety, and have put this entire community on the radar of state and federal regulators. So by all means, let's talk about my welcome mat. The room erupted, not in anger at me, but at the board. Residents were on their feet, shouting questions about the funds, about the liability, about Brenda's insane overreach. Bob and Carol were looking at Brenda as if she'd just lit their life savings on fire. The HOA president banged his gavel weakly. This meeting is adjourned. The board will convene in a closed session to discuss these unforeseen financial developments. He didn't have to say anything else. It was over. Brenda was politically, financially, and socially annihilated. And everyone in the room knew it. A week later, a new kind of quiet settled over Maple Creek Estates. It was a quiet born not of oppressive rules, but of genuine, palpable fear. Dave and Gary were back, finishing my fiber installation. This time, no one bothered them. They worked with the joyous freedom of liberated soldiers, burying my new connection in enough concrete to survive a direct missile strike. They refused to let me pay their invoice for the lost time, claiming that seeing the look on Brenda's face would be payment enough. The HOA held another emergency meeting. I didn't attend. The result was a neighborhood-wide email. Brenda had been forced to resign from the board in disgrace. To cover the massive invoices I had submitted, a one-time emergency community liability assessment of nearly $4,000 per household was being levied. I was, of course, exempt. I became a local legend, a ghost story, the guy who brought down the Queen. My neighbors didn't talk to me. They avoided eye contact, but they also left my trash cans alone. One afternoon, I found a freshly baked apple pie on my doorstep with a simple, unsigned note that just said, "Sorry." I was back in my office, my sanctuary. My new internet connection was a thing of beauty. My screens were a tranquil sea of green. All was right with the world. I pulled up my network configuration panel. I still had the old COG line configured as a tertiary backup, a failsafe of last resort. In the network map, I had renamed the connection. It was no longer Trunk Line 7B. It was now, and forever would be, the Brenda Bypass. I took a sip of my coffee and leaned back, the gentle hum of my servers a comforting symphony. They had finally given me what I wanted all along. Not just quiet, but peace. The kind of peace that's bought and paid for with a $75,000 invoice and the vague, lingering threat of federal intervention. Yeah, that's the good stuff,